It's time for another episode of Love, Marriage, and Fantasies. I am Star Claiborne.
And I am Anton Leonard Claiborne. And we are your global relationship strategists.
We live our marriage on the guided principle, no one or no thing.
So, take some time, listen, as we make sense of all of this. Okay, everybody, we're back with another episode of Love, Marriage, Fantasy Podcast. In this episode, we are addressing this question. Do you know your partner's sex fantasy? We're going to talk about the dislikes. We're going to honestly look at that. We're going to talk about the likes. And we're going to talk about hot button topics.
That should be interesting, those hot button topics.
Let's get into this. Star, how are you today?
I'm here.
Well,
let me say that louder. I'm here.
All right, so this discussion should be a revealing discussion for all of our listeners because we feel there are many couples who have not really sat down and shared their sexual fantasies. Would you agree with that?
I do.
I know you do. That's why I just said
a lot of couples don't even have regular sex conversations, let alone discussing the actual fantasies.
You're right. A lot of couples do not even have the regular sex conversations. We hope that this episode will help you feel comfortable with at least having a regular conversation, because then it will lead you into having the conversation about the more taboo or risque things regarding your sexual fantasies.
Right. So if we take a step back here and looking at just having that regular conversation, we say regular, it's not really a regular conversation. It should be a regular conversation.
Because if you're talking about your sexual likes, that should be a regular conversation.
It should be a regular conversation.
True.
But what I'm saying is a lot of people don't have that conversation. So we're here to encourage you to have that conversation with your partner about what you like and what you dislike in your sexual pleasures. What is it that you really enjoy sexually? What is it that you don't like sexually? Getting that expressed over to your partner will make things a lot better for your sex life.
Yes, it will. And it will make it a lot even more better if you don't take this conversation personally. If you don't take it as a personal attack to your character, you will gain more from the conversation.
But the key is honesty, because what you don't want to do is get into a relationship where you're assuming that this person likes something and they don't, and then now you're upset with that person because that's what you thought, right? So your partner needs to be honest with you, and you need to be honest with your partner.
I think one of the reasons why people tend to get upset during these type of conversations is because they may have been with their spouse or partner for years, but then this conversation happens and they suddenly find out that their partner was never satisfied with a particular sexual thing that's been happening for years.
I would agree.
And so then they get a little angry because they feel as though their partner has been lying to them over these years.
Right.
By not saying, because the partner didn't say, hey, I don't like it when you talk to me in that manner while we're having sex. Please don't do that. Well, if that person had been doing that for 7 years, they're going to think that, okay, well, what else have you been, holding back on?
Right. Yeah. So that's why it's so important that you really talk about those things. And when they are, there's always going to be things that, which I'm going to say there should always be things that come up different in a sexual conversation. And I'm saying that because if it isn't, then you're not enhancing your sexual experience. Because if you're enhancing your sexual experience, there's always something to discuss as far as the like and dislike. You're always trying something new to see if you or your partner is going to like it. Neither one of you may not know in the beginning. Hell, I don't know, but let's try it anyway, right?
Right.
But it still needs to be a conversation of, did you like that, or did you like certain aspects of what happened during that sexual encounter? Right? So things are going to always come up. They should always come up, but you can't wait until 5 years later, 10 years later, and then wonder why you're getting a divorce.
Right. Right.
Right. And of course, there's probably
Conversations
other
like this
factors to divorce, but
could prevent a divorce. Conversations like this could prevent a divorce.
could definitely prevent a divorce. Divorce, as long as you keep that conversation very, very open. I mean, hell, I don't know. Set aside time to just have that conversation alone.
Yes. I do want to suggest this, though, Star, to our listeners. When you decide to have this conversation, try not to do it immediately after having sex.
Yes, that's important.
You can, but I would suggest that you don't do it.
That's why
because
I said
many people feel, vulnerable during that post-sex period. If you start a conversation like this, they may feel like you are attacking their sexual techniques, their sexual practices that they've been using for years, and they will not be willing to cooperate with you if you're trying to get them to talk about this immediately following sex. With that in mind, I would suggest when you're ready to have this conversation during a period when you and your partner are just alone, you're very relaxed, just having a good time, and in a really good mood. By having the conversation during that period, you're reducing the chances of it turning into something negative.
Right. So let's look at, do you know your partner's sexual fantasies? Like, what is it that your
What's your
partner
fantasy? Yeah.
what is your partner's sexual fantasy? Like, have you all even had that conversation? Are you listening to this and saying, oh my goodness, I have no clue? Are you listening to this and saying, I don't know and I don't want to know? Are you listening to this and saying, absolutely, I know. We've already had this discussion. Great. You already know. Are you willing to do it? Are you willing to open that up? What are you feeling as we talk about that fantasy aspect? Because fantasies tend to have a very negative connotation behind them.
They do. They tend to have a very negative connotation.
But even if you disagree with the fantasy, it's still important that you have the conversation.
Yes.
Because one of the things I truly believe is that even if you disagree with that fantasy, there's still some recreation of that fantasy that you may be able to do that can get close to that fantasy for your partner.
Correct.
Which could potentially help.
Yes.
Is that the case?
Yes, that is the case. But you won't know if you could, like Star said, create a different version of your partner's fantasy if you don't have the conversation about sexual fantasy.
Because you don't know what they want.
Right. So we hope you're seeing that the key thing to this discussion is you taking the steps to start the conversation about sexual fantasies. Just get it started. If you can do that, you'll be helping your relationship in a huge way, because you will be allowing your partner to express things that they probably have been wanting to say, but wasn't quite sure how to say it.
And that's one of those hot button topics that we were talking about. It, when we were going through the overview of what we were going to talk about, we mentioned hot button topics. That's a major, major hot button topic that, couples just don't have. They avoid it just because of the negative stigma behind it. And I think that's what does not need to happen. So let's talk about this. Go ahead.
Let me just say this, though. But one of the reasons why many couples see the discussion of sexual fantasies as a bad thing is because of the examples they see on television and in movies. The producers of those shows, they tend to make the fantasy seem like something that's going to destroy the relationship.
That is true. And can we just say this and just make it known from our perspective as CICG that we say turn the damn TV off.
Turn it off.
Turn TV off. Turn off the reality shows. Turn off all that bullshit that is, that's tainting the images of what is going to make your marriage and relationship happy.
That's right, because one of the worst things you can do is compare your relationship to a relationship you see on television.
Yeah, don't compare yourself to the people on TV and don't expect to have what they have on television. Build your own and create your own relationship, marriage, happiness. What does your partner want? What do you want? Talk about it. Do it. Make it happen. Or some version of it.
Right, or some version
right?
of it.
But turn the TV off. Like, we do not watch a lot of TV in this house.
No.
We don't. Because the media is so bad with portraying things. It is so bad. And it will have you all messed up mentally, right? Trying to figure out what the hell is going on television versus what's going on in your relationship.
Correct.
Do whatever the hell makes you happy.
Correct.
Right? So let's talk about this. You came across a specific fantasy that, and I did my air quotes.
Yes,
you came across a different, particular fantasy. I'm not sure where you found it, but I want to talk about that a little bit, and I would love as you all are listening for you to comment and tell us what you think about this one.
All right. So the situation was this: I was watching a YouTube skit video, and in this skit, the guys were sitting around, having man talk, and one of the guys mentioned the desire he had to have sex with one of his girlfriend's friends. So, of course, they all laughed about it and was making jokes and everything. But shortly after that, one of the guys was on his way home, and he noticed that his girlfriend's car was home. So he's thinking she took the day off from work to spend time with him. He goes into their apartment, and to his surprise, he hears her in the room, and there's a man's voice coming from the other side of the door as well. So he gets his gun, and he approaches the bedroom door. He pushes the door open. To his surprise, one of his old friends he hadn't seen in years is in the bed with his girlfriend. He put the gun down and began to greet his old friend as though they hadn't seen each other in years. Like, hey, how you doing? How's everything going? I haven't seen you in a long time. And so the girlfriend is looking at her boyfriend like, okay, what's going on? He's not mad? She couldn't understand. So the boyfriend then, remembering the conversation he had prior about wanting to have sex with one of his girlfriend's friends, the boyfriend then told his longtime friend, hey, I see what you're doing. We good. You go ahead, finish doing what you're doing, but no longer than 15 minutes. I'll give you 15 minutes. You go ahead and do what you're doing, but no eye contact is what he told. He told him no eye contact and no kissing. But you get 15 minutes, no more than 15 minutes. You come on out, and then we're gonna finish talking. So his friend said, "Oh, okay. I thank you. I appreciate that." And the girlfriend was looking at both of them like, "What in the heck is going on here?" And then it ended right there. Okay, so I wanted to bring this up because, in addition to the fantasy of a man being with multiple women, the fantasy of a man being with one of his girlfriend's friends, that's almost at the same level of the fantasy of being with multiple women. So I'm bringing this up because of our male listeners. If that is one of your fantasies, you sleeping with one of your girlfriend's friends, you should mention this. You should bring it up and talk about it seriously, because you will never know what her response will be if you don't talk about it. To your surprise, she may say she's okay with it. She may say, okay, no more than 15 minutes. And whatever you do in that 15 minutes, that's all you get. Not
Okay.
15 minutes and 1 second. You get 15 minutes. That's it. So keep that in mind, guys. Talk about your fantasies, because that's the only way you will know if you will have the chance to make your fantasies reality.
That is true. But I will say that I think, coming from a female, them approaching a fantasy that involves someone they know, there might need to be some a different approach. You might have to work that one in a little bit, because when it comes to
but
knowing
the thing
someone,
is, you won't be able to work it in if you don't talk about it.
Right. So the point is, you want to talk about your fantasies, because having that conversation about people who you know is a little bit more difficult, because you don't know what they're going to say. Much more importantly with that one, but it'll make it easier for you to say what needs to be said.
Absolutely.
So I think that's one of those major hot button topics. Another hot button topic is those past experiences.
What do you mean regarding?
Like those past experiences with past sexual experiences.
Oh yeah, there are many people who don't like to discuss those.
But I think it's important.
It is important. It's important for two reasons that come to mind. One being, they can help you to learn some of the things that your partner liked. I mean, some of your partner's sexual likes and dislikes. The other thing is, they can help you to learn how to comfort your partner during sex.
Right, and that's what I was going to say too. It's, if you really become an active listener as they're speaking about their past experiences, you'll pick up on pieces that they may not directly communicate, especially if the past was bad. If they can't fully articulate it, and yes, unfortunately, people do move forward in relationships and decide to be with other people, even though they still have these past concerns, and no, they don't know how to fully articulate it, but they're telling you while they're telling you the story. So if you're listening to the story and you're actively listening to really understand and pay attention to their gestures and their emotions at the time that they get to certain points, so this is that nonverbal communication that's happening, you will know that it was something that was very bothersome, or something that they kind of felt was okay, could have taken it a little bit further. So, them telling you about their past, good or bad, you can pick up on a lot, as long as you really open yourself to being an active listener and not judging.
Yes. And that would be the challenge, not judging. Because when a person, and I'm laughing because I used to struggle with this, but when a person reveals something that you kind of had an idea existed within them, you tend to start thinking, I knew it. I knew it all along, but now to hear you say it, now I have proof that it's real.
Oh yeah, that's pretty bad.
And so then at that point you start judging. You don't want to do that. You want to allow your partner to express whatever it is that they feel comfortable expressing. If you do that, it will allow them to feel to open up and express even more. However, the moment they feel as though you're going to judge them or they start feeling uncomfortable, they're going to shut down. They're going to start shutting down and not wanting to talk anymore. That's what you don't want, because then you won't have the opportunity to share your fantasies. You will have screwed the whole conversation up.
Right.
And so, let's talk about something that we have shared.
Okay.
All right.
I have no idea what he's about to say. Like, I don't like when he does that.
I'm going to go off into our past a little bit. So we took a test a while ago to discover where we ranked in our sexual experiences. Both of us ranked rather high, but to our surprise, we ranked higher than we thought we would. And I thought that was interesting. I thought it was interesting because according to this sexual test, our sex drives are beyond average.
Right.
You know, so to me that was like, oh, okay, well, I guess, you know, we're doing pretty good over here on our side. I would have thought that we was a little bit beyond average, but not far beyond average as this test made us seem. No, I knew we were not average, right? Would you agree with that?
Right.
I knew we were not average, but maybe just a little bit beyond average. But according to this test, yeah, we're beyond a little bit of average, right? So I'm bringing this test up just to give you an example of something you can do to start a conversation about sexual fantasy. There are multiple things that you can do, and one of them is maybe you can go online and find a test like that will allow you and your partner to answer these questions. Then afterwards, you sit down and you talk about the answers. It'll help you to discover some things you probably had not known, and it'll help you to remember some things you probably had forgotten. So that's just one way to help you get that sexual fantasy conversation started.
It was a very interesting test, to say the least.
To say the least.
Yeah.
To say the least.
It was very interesting, but it was more interesting, of course, to learn your results. Very interesting to learn the results.
Okay, so this episode should be taken as a learning experience.
Hold on.
Okay.
There's another hot button topic.
There is?
Yes.
What is it?
It's beliefs and values.
Oh, I forgot about that. Yes. Woo. Yes, that you're right. That is a hot button. Those are hot button topics.
Because your belief system and those values that you have can be a major, and I am not overstating this. It can be a major issue in your sex life.
Mm-hmm.
It can make or break your sex life.
Mm-hmm. If
you don't really sit down and talk about those beliefs and values, it will definitely break it. And one of those things, as we very well know, being religion and spirituality, right? It's one of the things being religion and spirituality is something you have to ask yourself, because we're taught to act a certain way according to our spirituality. But what we're seeing from the people who are telling us that is not such.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
And unless you put two and two together, unless you don't put those two together and really sit down and analyze that, you will forever think one is supposed to lead your life until you realize that they're working against one another. So you then have to sit down and analyze your own belief system and understand your own values, not saying to go against your spirituality, not saying to go against the people who raised you or who are teaching you these different values. I'm not saying to go against that, but you have to sit down and analyze it and understand what is happening for you to see two things work against each other in action, but not in voice.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, I'm really glad you brought this up. I say that because we was talking about this earlier. I have come to accept when a person embraces their sexuality, when they identify and accept their sexual desires as being their truth, it changes that person.
Mm-hmm.
They stop living their life according to what they were taught in their youth. They become a self-empowered person after embracing their sexuality.
But again, it still opens you up to discussing those uncomfortable conversations like the fantasies.
It does.
Right?
It does.
And having those uncomfortable conversations about what you like and dislike. And some people can probably agree it's harder to discuss your likes than your dislikes.
A huge reason for that, I should say, like you said, is in part because of the religious and spiritual teachings that a person received when they were growing up.
Right.
Discussing those likes, those sexual likes, is usually not permitted in a religious household. It's usually frowned upon when you're practicing spirituality. So you're raised throughout your childhood, teen years, and early adult to think that if you express your sexual likes in any form, it's going to be something bad for you.
Right.
Then once you become an adult where you're completely independent, you're out on your own, you're still carrying around that judgment that your parents told you would fall upon you if you express your sexual likes. It's still with you. You're still carrying it around deep within you. It's affecting you emotionally, and as a result, you have difficulty expressing your sexual likes. That difficulty will affect every sexual relationship you will have as an adult until you embrace your sexuality as your truth and allow it to empower you so that you can use it to create your own happiness, the happiness that's best for you.
Without other people in your ear.
Without other people in your ear. Without those memories from what your parents was telling you that if you do anything to please yourself sexually, it's going to be bad. So these type of conversations are necessary. Whether we want to admit it or not, they are necessary.
Very necessary.
Although when we finally admit that they're necessary, if we're honest with ourselves, we'll see that these conversations help change our lives. They help us to start expressing how we truly feel versus how we think the people we're talking to want us to express to them how we feel. So,
right.
Sexual fantasies, yeah, it's one of those topics where if you don't talk about it honestly, you're not going to make any progress.
Absolutely.
You agree?
I agree.
Yeah. So then take the time to bring it up and at least get this conversation started.
If you have a hard time vocalizing it, write it down and then y'all just go through the list that way. That's a way to get started too if you have a real issue vocalizing.
Yes, that's a good idea. Write it down and slide that note over to your partner and ask them to look over it and discuss it when they feel comfortable discussing it.
And neither of you should take it personal. Just don't take it personal. That's the big key. Like, I don't think anything when you're having these type of conversations, none of this should be taken personally when you're in a relationship or in the dating phase. Don't take it personal. This is what this person likes. This is what they've grown to like.
Yes.
It doesn't mean you have to like it. It just means you now know what the person likes. It doesn't mean I'm going to take this personal. I'm not going to judge you because I don't want you judging me. And you don't know what that person has been through. You don't know where they've been or what they've done. But you also don't know what they can bring to the table for you that maybe you haven't experienced.
That's right. So then you not only want to talk about the dislikes, you want to talk about the likes, and you want to talk about possibly doing some things with that person so that they can then decide whether or not they want to participate in your fantasies. And like Star said earlier, you give them the opportunity to figure out how they can place themselves in your fantasy by saying something along the lines of, well, I'm not comfortable with doing these things that you mentioned in your fantasy, but I am comfortable with doing this. So let's talk about doing that so that I can participate in your fantasy. When you approach the discussion in a manner like that, you create the opportunity for that person to experience their fantasy and for you to be a part of that person's fantasy. The result will be both of you continuing your happy relationship.
That's right.
What were you going to say?
I forgot.
You forgot?
I think I was going to say something along the lines of, if you have the conversation and you don't like that person's fantasy, again, you're just kind of like you reiterating the same thing, but you're having that ability to create your own fantasy, because this is what they like, this is what you like. You may disagree, but how can you create your own fantasies together?
Right, because the truth is, all of us have sex. If you are a sexually active person, you have a sexual fantasy. You just have to take some time out to discuss those fantasies with your partner so y'all can create fantasies that will work for both of you. All right. I hope we said something to help you bring some of your sexual fantasies to real life experiences. I hope you are able to talk this over with your partner and you all discover something that's going to change your relationship into your dream relationship.
Your fantasy relationship.
Yeah. We'll talk to you on the next episode. That wraps it up for another episode of Love, Marriage, and Fantasy.
Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel at Claiborne Coaching. Download the podcast, Love, Marriage, and Fantasy, and look us up on Facebook at Claiborne Coaching.
All right, so we'll see you next time.